Hey now, and how are you doing? Want to welcome you to the next episode of Peace, Love, and Bring a Bat. Today we're bringing on my friend Regina. Man, we're going to talk about dancing. We're going to talk about a whole bunch of things, but we're definitely going to rise to lead. How are you doing today, Regina?
I am doing fabulous. Thank you so much, Dave, for having me on. I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah, we talked about this a while. Well, we met at Sifu's place right here on Long Island, and then
Yeah,
we just got to make it happen, and we finally got to make it happen. So thank you for the
yeah,
opportunity. Why don't you tell everybody
absolutely.
how amazing you are, and then we'll dive in a little further.
How amazing I am. Okay. Okay. So I have a very eclectic background, that's for sure. Very adventurous background. Grew up in a tiny little village of about 10 houses in Bavaria, Germany. And back then, my world was quite small, but it soon grew bigger when I moved to Munich, first of all, at age 19, and then 26, I moved to Spain. That was my first move abroad. And from there, I've really never stopped moving. And you mentioned dance. Well, I didn't grow up with dance actually, but I added it on later in my life. It's a big passion of mine. I'm not a professional dancer or anything like that, but it's taught me so much over time and definitely has resulted in some really amazing lessons for both business and leadership. And yeah, so as I said, yeah, I spent 7 years in Spain. A total of 16 years at the Boston Consulting Group in several different locations, helped them open a couple of offices in Portugal and Brazil. Lived in Brazil and Argentina twice. The second time, each time with my own business, brick-and-mortar businesses, and then eventually moved to New York City in 2012. And since then, I've also traveled quite a bit again, mostly on the African continent, but also, other places. Spent some time in France, some time in Florida, where I'm currently based with my residence, and my business is still based in New York City. And this is Transform Your Performance. It's a coaching, speaking, and training business.
Well, all that experience, I don't even know where to start. But I guess what I'd love to hear is because you've been in leadership your whole life. Most part of your life, right? Not the whole life, right? You had some years like from 0 to 7. You were probably playing with dolls. But other than that, I would love to hear how you see dance matches with leadership because you have been in leadership, and you not that you were always included, but we just always want to look at leadership differently, and you definitely bring a different way to see things, and I'd love to have your perspective on what leadership is and how we can take that dance with clients and things like that.
Yeah, let's just start maybe at couple dancing, partner dancing, right? When in partner dance, we typically have a leader and a follower. And they both communicate, but not through words. They use nonverbal communication. So that shows us a lot about the importance of nonverbal communication, because if the leader does not clearly communicate his or her intention through their energy and through their bodies, then we cannot follow them really. It's also not building trust. So it doesn't feel secure or safe when we dance with somebody who cannot communicate their intention and who are insecure themselves about their next step. So it's really important to have that transparency in that communication and that clarity in that communication. So that's one thing. Because dancing isn't just about steps or rhythm, it's about intention, about energy exchange, about body language, about self expression, and that authentic self expression that we also, in a way, expect from leaders, right, Dave? And when they have that, then we know whether we can trust them. Because if somebody doesn't come across as authentic, then we automatically they have that energy that we cannot trust. And that again has to do with that. We often say that it takes 7 seconds to make a first impression. Have you ever heard that?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Well, it actually takes much less than that because it only takes about zero point zero 0.07 seconds for our brains to figure out whether we can trust someone. That's our survival mechanism. And that's why it's so fast. It has to be fast. And what does that mean? Our energy speaks faster than our words, and it also speaks usually louder than our words. So, coming back to dance, energy is a very important component there. And it's also a very important component in our business presence, in our leader presence, or executive presence, as we sometimes call it. And oftentimes, when we think about presence, we think about other things like how is this person dressed? Well, it does have an impact too. Of course, everything is important, everything flows into it. But we oftentimes forget about talking about energy. And that's actually what flows into everything, into our body language, into our words, our actions, our thoughts, our emotions. So it's really important. And dance teaches us a lot about that. It has so many lessons that it's taught me about business in general, also about how we use our space on the dance floor or in a dance ensemble if we maybe practice when we perform together, right?
Hmm.
Even in a dance class, we need to know how to use our space. We need to consider other people in that team. And we also, in some circumstances, need to be able to rely on those people to watch out for us. Or if, for example, if we do aerial movements, we have to absolutely be able to depend on that person who throws us in the air. And I've done those too a long time ago, but I've done those back in Brazil in Samba de Gafira dancing in the middle of a crowd. I had to absolutely trust that guy to not just pick me up from the floor, but to actually not drop me to the floor. And these are things that not just partner dances show us, but also other types of dances, right? So I could go on and on about
Yeah,
this
no,
topic.
and we will because it really is. It's also trust. I mean, these are the important parts of leadership. Trust,
Mhm.
the mindset, right? Can I trust
Mhm.
somebody, even if they say, if they think that you could trust them? Not
Mhm.
always do we trust them, and the heart set, that role of energy. I love that you talk about that, because when we talk about leadership, and that's why I wanted to start off with the blending, talking about leadership, is that you're one of the experts in leadership when you're talking about energy and heart-centered leadership. And what do you mean by heart-centered leadership? Well, there's a lot of people that use that comment, and then when you really start digging deeper, they're not really heart-centered, they're just self-centered.
Well, first of all, heart-centered leadership starts from the premise that people are the heart of any organization. Without them, no organization exists, right? So that's, first of all, very, very important to remember. So we need to put people at the heart of the leadership. And we have seen in many cases that when that happens, we can actually also more easily move out of a crisis. For example, let's say our numbers dropped. Oftentimes, the first focus of our leader is on the numbers, on the results, right? That they want to get those numbers back. But
Sure.
how do you do that? Not without the people. So if you focus on the people first, then the numbers will follow. And the heart centered has many other components, by the way. It's all, of course, to do with people, right? With the human factor, but it also has to do with, for example, for leaders, finding courage, because we find courage in our hearts, about being able to use our intuition, access that intuition. We find that in our hearts. The logical mind doesn't always give us a solution or the best solution. Yes, it's necessary, absolutely, but I believe that when we bring to the together what I call the heart set and the mindset, that's when the magic happens. And then that's also when leaders become more effective. And there's so much more to the heart. I mean, you talk about in this podcast, you also talk about these components, right? And this
Sure.
is so important in your podcast. So it's about compassion, love.
Yeah,
Love
right.
has absolutely a place in leadership and in business.
Yeah, no, well, 100%. It's that energy that, to me, heart centered.
Mhm.
is that I'm putting my efforts in there, thinking about the group, not just about me. And
Mhm.
it's that unconditional love when I'm like, all right, you might have done me wrong, or or something, but I still give you love because from your perspective, it's right. It's all perspectives, and being able to have that, emotional intelligence to have those conversations. It's not just, all right, let's just do this. Let's do something. Because it's I know you talk about a paradigm leadership, and your transformational parts of that, because that's the heart, right? So our heart
Mhm.
sends blood all over because it's oxygenated, and it keeps us all healthy. But the same thing goes through leadership, a heart-centered leadership. The pumping of the process moves throughout leadership and moves out throughout the whole experience, and it has to start to feed the people who are being led, and the employees, the other people in the community. That's why it's not only about feeding the heart. The heart can't live by itself. What do you think about that your paradigm? Why don't you explain a little bit about your transformational paradigm leadership?
Yeah, I have created a few frameworks because sometimes you need to conceptualize, even though the coaching is of course 100% customized, but it's more so that people can realize what I'm about, what my thinking is like. So one of the frameworks is called New Paradigm Leadership, and it has the component heart as one of the four elements. So there's heart, there's mind, there's message and trust. And message, of course, stands for communication, mind for mindset, and what we can, because of course it impacts everything we do as well. And then the fourth element is trust, because trust is the glue that holds a team together and that allows for creativity and innovation to flow. And so the heart here also stands for what I've already explained,
Mm.
but it also stands for, when I talk about heart set, it's also about using that unique wisdom that we have gained over time, because I believe that we store that in our hearts, that very unique wisdom. And then the mind and the heart work together, right? But sometimes it's that what makes us so valuable as a unique being, our unique experiences and what we have gained from them.
Yeah, no, and well, I guess part of, again, leadership, we're talking about the energy, the heart.
Mhm.
It's also about the actions, but also looking at what's going on, not just saying, I know all the answers, let me implement it. It's more about that flow, that wonderful flow to make, a thriving leader.
Yeah, and including others, but also any leadership needs to start with yourself. So that self-awareness, that self-development, and then that creates a ripple effect in your team. A thriving leader is always more likely to create a thriving team. Right? So it's very important to start with yourself and that self-care and while at the same time you're interacting with other people and you're allowing them to participate in wherever it makes sense. Like, for example, in certain decisions, like, for example, delegating in a way that benefits everybody to a certain extent. Uh, that's the most effective way to delegate when people feel a part of it, when they feel sometimes a bit challenged, when they feel like they are growing, learning, and when their participation and their contribution count, right? That's very, very important. And we always say, oh yes, when they're seen and heard, but what does that really mean? Well, it means that they are included in some decision making. It doesn't have to be all decisions, but and where it makes sense, right? And that they get the communication they need so that and they understand the bigger picture, and so they understand those other decisions where they're not involved, so
Yeah,
that they understand the why behind those decisions, because that's always how you get buy-in much more easily than for those decisions.
right. I mean, it's even as a parent, when you explain to your kids, they don't always get everything, and why the whys. Now you don't have to explain the whys, right? There's a lot of, I'm the parent, that's it. But in a leadership and parenting, it's much easier when you explain it. They don't have to like the idea, and you don't have to, when you're working in an organization, you don't have to always agree with everything, but you have to make sure you're rowing the boat in the same direction. That nobody's drilling holes in the boat, and that's where the power really comes into what we're doing, how we're doing it, and what we do to go forward.
Yes. What's also really important is that people know what the vision is. What is the
Right.
overall vision, and how then, also encourage people to think about how that overall vision is aligned with their own individual visions
Yeah.
for
Well,
themselves.
part of that is that communication, and I know the communication, but all of this also ties in really well into, I know how important it is for you, the service of freedom, right? You have to have the freedom. Part of leadership is freedom, that people, you could hear the feedback from others, that you might not like the feedback because you didn't know about it. That's why I'm a big proponent of, let's stop talking about, don't be afraid of the elephant in the room. Let's actually bring the elephant to the conversation, and then we can have the conversation. Make people educated so they can make the decision what's best for them.
Right. And this freedom is also about, for example, let's just talk about business owners for a moment, right? Like they oftentimes get so caught up in their businesses, and they created a business because they wanted more freedom. They did not want to be employed because they wanted to self-determine, maybe, make their own decisions. And then after a while, they find themselves trapped in the business they built. So it's also about that sometimes, to regain that freedom and to practice this more conscious leadership and self-leadership, where you can bring more, not just more freedom, but also more joy and harmony into your life and into the business again. And again, that will have a positive effect on your team as well. Because this is why I love to work with leaders, David, because they create a ripple effect. Anything, if they go through transformation, their teams will automatically go through some type of transformation, especially in small teams, right? But also in the bigger ones, because it will get conveyed to them in some way, because the leader shows up differently, the presence changes, and all of that. And then, of course, if they want to, they can also actively pass on what they learned through that transformation, and allow others to experience similar transformation as well.
Right, because part of the goal of a leader is not only to lead every time they step in a room, it's also to leave that leadership, idea, the methods in the room, for to one, be transmuted for some people, and shaped into the other people's visions of what that is. That's why communication and having that transformational leadership is so important.
Absolutely. Yeah, communication is key because but again, it doesn't only happen through words. It happens through so many different components. Yes, it's important what words we use, how we use language, and when we use it and whatnot. However, this is not the only factor. I mean, you're familiar with those studies that tell you that it's actually a smaller factor in our communication package, or combination of things that make up communication, right? But it's just about how you also come across. I cannot say that often enough. As a leader, it's your energy. It's not just the level of your energy, it's the quality of your energy. And that's something we really want to cultivate, because it's not just important for your team, it's important for your customers, your clients, your products, and how it shines through your business, or if you incorporate, through the entire department in a way.
Sure, yeah, because it all steams through, right? It's not just the words; it's the actions, it's the presence of what you do, and again, the to me, it's also the impact when you leave the room. right? I've been in a lot of conversations recently about talking about leaders, right? There's a lot of people, everybody has an opinion, right? Good, bad, or indifferent, but they won't step up. They're like, hey, Dave, why don't you say this? Like, no, no, no. I'm going to say what I'm comfortable with saying. And that's my leadership is like, I'll say things that not necessarily are always recognized by the community because I wanted them to push themselves, and then you can make a different decision, right? Once you're fully educated, we get to make that better decisions. Because that's what a leader does is make those better decisions by educating the community. If you're the only one who has all the answers, what happens when you step away? You know, and,
Yeah.
and, and to me, that's it's a package. It's not just any one thing. That's why you can't just say, I raise my hand and I'm a leader. You can say that, but that doesn't mean that that's going to be. What are some of the characteristics that you would say a leader needs to have?
Well, I already mentioned earlier courage,
Yep,
right?
sure.
Also, the courage to stand up and swim against the stream sometimes. And we have not seen a lot of that in the last few years, I think,
Yeah.
in many cases. So, that is definitely something that I personally would like to see more of. Curiosity is a highly undervalued leadership trait. It's that healthy curiosity, of course, not being noisy and knowing, needing to know everything about your entire team's lives, but that curiosity that allows you to get to know your team members, also other people, right? Peers, whoever it is. But if you focus on the team, to really get to know what their not just their aspirations are, as we always say, but also what their strengths are, what their uh, hidden talents are that you might not have uncovered yet, what they might actually rather do in the team than what they're doing now, so that you can also then adapt job descriptions accordingly, because there might be some treasures in your team that you don't even know about. And some people might be actually could be happier in another job in the team, while others would be happier in that job, right? We don't know all these things before we actually uh, actively ask about them. And so it's really important to have those conversations and be uh, genuinely curious. Okay.
Well, yeah, no, 100%, because that's what you have to do is as a leader or even people on the team, if you and I are on a team, yeah, like a team that we need to do movements like dancing for whatever reason we would need to do
Mhm.
that. Um, I'm not the guy to do it with. I'm not a comfortable dancer. I'm not, but to have somebody like you and the leader might not know that, right? They don't know all of our skill sets, and that's why it's up to us in the community at times to raise our hand and speak forward and be like, hey, let's just educate people of what my skill sets are. Let's educate people on that. And the same thing for the leader is saying, if I don't know what Dave does or I don't know what Regina does, it's my responsibility to ask that deeper question.
Right. Yeah, and when I say courage, also, David, it's also about the courage to lead differently and to sometimes break away from those conventional success models or leadership success models.
Mhm.
If we see that there's something else there that might be, worth exploring, and not just stick with old formulas. If they are maybe not even aligned with our values and with who we are as leaders. Because again, it's about this authenticity that we talk so much about. This is a word that is thrown around a lot, but what does that really mean? Are we true to our values and does that come through? And do people know what they are? And
Right, and that's that whole part, helping people identify what their passions and why their passions are important, and how is it related to your brilliance? What do you call it when that happens? People who might not diamond in the rough, might not know the value that you see in somebody else.
absolutely. I call this the unique brilliance, right? Everybody has unique brilliance. So we want to uncover that. You want to uncover it in yourself as a leader and go really deep with it, because leaders are meant to stand out and not to blend in. So it's really important, but also with your team. And I believe very strongly that the more we know what our own brilliance is, the easier it becomes to see it in others. And the less we also feel threatened by others, and the less we have a need to compete.
Mhm.
Because it's not about competing, it's about bringing your own brilliance and combining it, complementing it with the brilliance of others. That's what it's about.
Yeah, right, and that's what it is. It's George Bush, 1,000 points of light. One point of light will give us some way out of the darkness, but that 1,000 points of light will lead us and be a lighthouse to make sure people miss the rocks on underneath.
Yeah, so I never quote politicians
Okay.
because I don't agree with any of them, but
Well,
I know too
it,
much.
it was not a political statement. So,
I know. I just am very strict with that usually because it easily gets in the wrong throat. You know how it is, David. And I totally understood it correctly. But of course, yes, the saying is right. And it's all light always becomes brighter when we have more sources of light,
sure.
right? So that's what this is about. And so we want to find those flames to move along with your
Yep.
imagery.
Yep.
We want to find those flames of light in our teams and combine it with our own. And you know what, David, what I found really useful also in terms of how to complement a team. We don't always have that option, okay? But when we do, actually, one method that I found, methodology, I should say, that I found useful is human design.
Mm.
So it's quite interesting because those profiles, and again, profiling always has a risk too of really putting people into boxes. That's not what I mean here. It's just like for me personally, it's been useful, and that's why I like it, and more so than some other methods for me personally. Okay, I've learned actually quite a few things about myself, and when I have used it with my clients to a limited extent, but still they often have said, "Oh, so there's nothing wrong with me." So now, because they understand themselves better. And when we have the option to hire somebody into our team, I think it's really, really useful to see, okay, what type of human design uh, type
Hmm.
would actually complement that team, because we have the manifestors, the generators, the manifesting generators, and so on, and they complement each other. Not everybody is made for the same things, or the same, not everybody works in the same way. And also, when we know how people function, some people need more breaks. Some people cannot work through 10 hours a day
Right.
without being severely somehow damaged mentally or whatever, if they do this in the long term. So it's really useful to know that, in my opinion.
No, 100%, right? Everybody has strengths and weaknesses, and that's the part of looking at it, right? Even as a team. So even as a team member, we want to know what your strengths and weaknesses are and how we can work more effective as a team. And knowing, where, hey, I need a break. I could work 15 hours a day, but just not 15 straight.
Yeah.
It's knowing that, and you have to know that yourself. It also goes back to that self knowledge. To knowing what you have and how it applies, that self awareness, how it applies to the larger community, how the larger team. And how do you help people bring that out in themselves? Because a lot of people aren't always self-aware. It's very easy in communities to get the pat on the back. Oh, that was great. That was great. But not everybody has that self-awareness of how others are seeing them, myself included at times.
Well, first of all, asking for feedback, right? And then also, I want to go back just quickly, because if you are somebody who functions in a certain way, and if you are made like that, so to speak, that you need frequent breaks, then that's how you will bring the best results. Okay, not powering through. Not everybody's made for that. And if you're forced to do that, then your results will actually suffer quite a bit, and your enthusiasm will suffer over time for the project or for the work you do because it goes against your nature, right? So there are people who work best like 4 hours a day and then they need a break and a substantial break. And that's why a lot of that's also part of the freedom that entrepreneurs love. And I just heard somebody talk about this yesterday who, so I'm in human design, I'm a manifestor, and she's too. And we are supposed to take breaks. And there are
Mhm.
people who can power through and they are not getting, they won't get tired so quickly because but they also need breaks, but they just function in a different way, and it's a very complex topic. But anyway, so and oftentimes we are so used to doing it anyway, but it's actually not good for us because the whole system is built in that way somehow, right? But to come back to your question, let me just remember that. I just want to add that for a moment.
Sure.
Yeah, so the self-awareness, right? Yeah. So feedback, of course, asking proactively for feedback is always a good way to find out more about how you're perceived, because our self-perception is not always the same as how we're perceived by others.
Right.
And self-observation, though, as well, right? I sometimes for some things it also helps to make lists, simple lists.
Yep.
Like, for example, if you want to know more about your unique brilliance and take a deeper dive on that, start with a simple list and list all your talents, your skills, your what you consider positive personality traits, whatever it is, and ask other people too. Again, feedback again. What do they value about you? What do they appreciate? What not so much, maybe, but really focus uh, on those valuable things first, make a list of that, and then that is also then going to help you to actually upgrade your self-confidence, your self-esteem, and it will help you see how much you actually have, because we often underestimate ourselves and we compare ourselves down
Hmm.
when we compare ourselves to other people. So that's one thing. And then also you could make a list of all your accomplishments so far, big and small, and really see, if I've accomplished all that, and I didn't really think I could maybe 20 years ago, how much more can I still actually accomplish? And we will notice that our potential is actually limitless, and that of other people too.
100%, right? And as a leader, as people, as part of a community, you want everybody to be unleashed, right? Because rising tide lifts all boats. So I guess it's another politician. But but the the idea is that if we lift each other up, we all rise. It's that's the version of things. Who are some people that who are some of the people that you admire and look into?
Look, I don't quote a lot of people at all because we have found out so many things about so many people that we didn't know in the past, and it's all coming to light in this day
Yeah, but
and age. But
but though, and when we go to that, I go, is what they said true, right? So,
right, right.
right,
Oh, I'm not
yeah,
contradicting you,
yeah.
David. I'm
No,
just
I know you're
saying
not.
it's my personal perspective now, but there are a few people for sure. I've always said my only role model is Pippi Longstocking, my only true role model, because she did everything. She lived her own life as she wanted, and she did not, really give a bleep about what other people were thinking about it. And she had that very unique way, and she never did any harm, really, right? So she was just living her life in her own way. She was courageous. She stood up for what she thought was right in her world, and so on. And yeah, so I really like that. So that's my only true role model, if I'm asked. However, I do really like, Prince and what he stood for. He was also standing up for artists in the music industry. He even years back, he spoke a lot of truth in his very gracious way that others did not dare to say. And there are a few more, that would fit that category. But I also happen to like his music, although I usually like these days I listen mostly to African music and other types of music, but I really still to this day, and that doesn't happen with a lot of artists, I can listen to Prince. So that's another reason, but I really love this person because of who he was.
Yep. Yeah, no, yeah, he's broad. I mean, those are the iconic people who bring thought, no matter what everybody else was, going to say, spoke his truth, and that's where I was going back to, know, what somebody says, their personal lives and all that stuff that gets brought in today's society, but are they speaking truth or are they not speaking truth? Right? If it's
Yeah.
moving a movement, then we'll go back to the dance because I can't get myself into trouble there. I don't know anything about dance. In that really going through the movement, the conversation, the energy that's put behind the words that we say, the actions that we do, and finding those people who are not always, you know, speaking to the whole organization, the whole world, right? Not everybody's going to get your message, but the right people are going to always get your message, and those are the people you're leading. No matter when you're a very accomplished speaker, you're in a room of 1,000 people. 1,000 people aren't going to always get your message. No matter who you are, I don't care how good you are, uh, but it's those one or two people, and you're in a room of 1,000. You want a little bit more than one or two, but it might only be that one or two. But that's the people that you need. Finding your people to lead, finding your people to get your message, but to see your vision so that way they can apply it to themselves.
Right. It's not my, as a speaker, it's also, of course, I want to inspire. Of course, I want to bring my message across, but it's not my job to decide whether it lands. It's the other
Right.
people's,
It's how
the
it's received.
audience's
Yep.
job to, okay, am I ready to receive this or not? And again, the readiness is not a judgment. It's just about that
Right.
person's own decision,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, 100%. It has nothing to do with the speaker. It has to always do with the recipient.
Hmm.
Yep. Well, I know we've taken up so much of your time, and I always want to walk into the magic garden, and you've given us so much advice. Is there one more seed that we can plant, or one more piece of advice that you'd like to share with us today?
Well, one thing that I often like to say is just that no one will ever be able to empower you but yourself. So don't
Mm.
wait for others to empower you. That's just not possible. I know we use that word a lot, but even leaders cannot empower others. They can only guide them to empower themselves. And it's your own decision. It's your own task, so to say, to take that on for yourself if you want to. There are many ways, and everybody does it in their own way, but it's
Mhm.
just something that we cannot wait for.
Yeah, no, 100%. How can people find you?
Yeah, I am. Everything is on my website, transformyourperformance.com. So basically, all the links are there as well. My YouTube channel, my podcast link, my books. Uh, And then I have something especially for leaders and business owners who might be a little bit too caught up in their success and not living enough. So if you'd like to download that, it's called the Invisible Success Trap Audit. And you can find that at reginahuber.com/audit.
Okay, I'll make sure both of those are in the notes so that way they can contact you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you so much as always, Regina. I enjoy our conversations and the times that we've gotten to spend together.
Thank you so much for having me on. I hope this has been valuable for our listeners.
I'm sure anybody who listens to this is going to find some value in all the conversations, and I do appreciate that.
All right. Thank
Uh,
you.
And everybody else, as always, I want to wish you peace and love in your life as your foundation. And then when you bring your bat, bring some awesome thoughts like Regina brought today, and be awesome and be authentic, be who you are for yourself. Thanks so much.